G'day, my name is Peter Scobie. I'm a Group Program Manager at Atlassian, and today I'm very excited to be talking to you about how Atlassian has changed and updated its corporate planning patterns. Before we jump into it, let's set the scene. So the agenda for this talk is as follows. I'm going to cover off who I am. I'm going to give you some context around the planning cycle at Atlassian. I'm going to share why we decided to mix it up and change a few things. And then I'm going to walk through our planning philosophy. And then I am going to get a bit more into the detail of exactly how we roll out our corporate planning. And then I'm going to wrap up with some final thoughts. So a bit about me. So I attended UNSW along with a few other people, and I was actually a Bachelor of Arts graduate. So I studied TV and film and theatre, of all things. And I moved into the TV industry, producing mainly documentaries, decided to move to the UK to progress the career, and then the GFC happened. So the financial crisis, and it was really hard to get a job. So I moved into digital and snagged a role at a kind of a hybrid production company / creative agency. And then I decided to move back home and went into the wonderful world of advertising and worked for some agencies and worked at a digital agency. Got to work on the Lexus account for a few years. That was fun, looking at nice cars all day. And then I actually became a bit of an Atlassian fanboy. I was the guy bringing in Jira and Confluence, and then also other SaaS tools like Dropbox and Basecamp and Slack. And I was all about how, my teams could use these tools to become more effective, especially when interfacing with our clients for feedback and things like that. And Atlassian reached out for some feedback, and I provided that feedback. And then I got invited to attend a design conference for Atlassian designers, and I was there as a customer on a panel, and I just had 50 designers at Atlassian eating out of the palm of my hand, wanting to get a better insight into how my team worked, what products we used, what we liked about Jira, what we didn't like about Confluence, competitor products that we were using. And I was just blown away with the customer centricity of the group and of the company. And I said to a colleague after, I said, I want to work for this company. So I applied for a product manager role and was not successful, which is probably a good thing. But I did apply for a program manager role, which suits my skills a bit better, and was lucky enough to get it. And I've been at the company for almost 6 years, and I work in the Journey to Cloud leadership team. So Journey to Cloud at Atlassian includes the data center teams, but also includes the migration product teams, which deliver the tooling required for enterprise and small to medium-sized companies to move from on-prem Atlassian solutions into Atlassian's cloud. Enough about me, you say. Let's get to the good stuff. All right, so now we're going to jump into some context, which is all about how we used to do annual company planning. So we traditionally did strategy planning in January to March. Then we moved into operational planning, April to June. Finance and business commitments were confirmed from February to May. And then we used the OKR framework. We stole that from Google. And that's all about, so we worked on company objectives and key results. That's what OKRs stand for, if you didn't know, from March to May. And then, so as you can see from this mock-up, it takes a large part of the year. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So half of the year you're in planning mode, and then the other half you're kind of executing that plan. Well, it was annual planning back then, so you had a year to execute, and then it wasn't that far into the year that you actually had to start planning for the next year. So around mid FY21, we decided to mix it up, and we decided to switch to quarterly planning. And we did that for 5 reasons. The first is that we were spending lots of time on plans, as I just mentioned. And these plans needed to change throughout the year due to shit happening throughout the year, right? So some projects completely failed. Some of our competitors made big moves in the market and we needed to respond. We might have learned things along the way as we were following that plan and needed to adjust. So as my good friend Mike Tyson once said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So that's kind of our mantra as to why we like to go for more of an agile approach towards planning. Like I said before, time was a big driver for this. So we were spending 6 months planning for 6 to 9 months worth of work, roadmap work. We're burning way too much value. You know, the value to effort curve, we were kind of up here somewhere. We were not getting a good bang for our planning buck. The third point is we were kind of already doing quarterly planning, given that, we had our annual OKRs and we did go through the annual planning process, but, teams were making immediate and timely decisions, required to execute and plan out our headcount anyway. So we were kind of doing 2 tracks of planning, quarterly and annual planning. So it made a lot of sense to switch. The fourth point is and I touched on this earlier, it helps us be a lot more responsive to the competitive environment. Tech, as we all know, moves very quickly, so we need to be more nimble than our competitors to win. And the larger we get, that could be a lot harder. So we need to be smart and lean when it comes to these types of patterns. Plus, as we get bigger, we're kind of realizing that less is more. And we saw this as a really good chance to simplify. So I guess in a nutshell, the adjustment from annual to quarterly planning is more around having a rolling 12 to 15 month view on our business. So it's about changing our rhythm on planning. It doesn't just mean doing the same thing, annual planning, jammed into quarters, and then doing that times 4 throughout the year, every quarter doing that same amount of work. It's really about having a snapshot in time of the upcoming 12 to 15 months, and then iterating that every quarter, taking another snapshot and rinse and repeat. All right, let's move into our planning philosophy. So I think before we jump into that, we should also just remind ourselves and level set what is strategy and what is an ops plan. Strategy gets thrown around all the time. Strategy for this, strategy for that. Are you a good strategic thinker? So strategy and ops plans are 2 very different things. For us, strategy is our long-term guidance on how we're going to navigate a landscape. Okay, and quite often in product world, it's a competitive landscape. Strategy is a plan to overcome some sort of challenge or adversity. An ops plan is how we execute on that strategy. And this includes on, for example, where we need to rebalance from an investment perspective. Strategy we see is being updated on an as-needed basis. Okay, when the facts change, your opinions need to change, your plans need to change. And ops plans, we're updating those on a quarterly basis, as I touched on. Ooh, video slides. So our strategies are plans. They are living documents, not something that you put into those drawers, even those sexy drawers that don't slam like this one. Even this drawer is too good for a strategy. You put something in that drawer, it just dies, okay? We've all been there. You spend months pining over an annual plan only to never revisit it again. In our world, you're always going to have a rolling 4-quarter view, we call it, or rolling 4 for short, which is a snapshot of the work that you can iterate quickly. And I'm going to walk you through what a rolling 4 page looks like. Plus, We have hardly any draws at Atlassian. We just have Confluence. So, second point of our philosophy is that if you miss this train, another one is coming the next quarter. So this is along the same vein of always be shipping. Don't stop and wait. If a dependency misses its deadline, then plan without it. It can be corrected next quarter. These are just snapshots in time, and it's okay that when stuff happens, if you miss that snapshot or if you miss that quarterly review, you only have to wait a few more months to get into the next one. The next point is around limiting quarterly planning sprints to 2 weeks. I won't lie, this is quite ambitious, and even we struggle with this, especially as levels of hierarchy and organization and teams cascades down. But in an ideal world, we do limit quarterly planning sprints to 2 weeks, so roughly 15% of a quarter. We really want to avoid the planning sprawl that I touched on in the earlier slides around our annual planning cycle taking a very long time. We really want to avoid teams avoiding the sprint starting early, even with best intentions to try and get ahead of it. We really try to encourage teams to be done by the 14th of the first month of the quarter. And large portions of your rolling plans are really continuations. So it's not as if with each quarterly plan, you throw out the old one and start from scratch. It really should be revisiting that, what's changed in the environment and the market from a headcount hiring perspective, and iterating on that plan. We really want teams to keep it simple. And as I said before, with the trains, there's always next quarter. In addition, we also practice zero-based planning. And that is another way of saying to plan assuming zero additional resources or budget. We are quite a privileged company in that we are growing and we do have a significant level of investment behind us. However, teams, really, we're advising them that if you firmly believe you need more resourcing, coordinate with your exec ops leader and fill out the ask section of the operational planning template, which I'll show you shortly. This point of the philosophy is all around pushing operational planning accountability down to the leaders closest to the work. And this is really important as far as that teams will get top-down guidance from Mike and Scott and exec ops on planning and resourcing in the quarterly State of Atlassian, which I'll touch on what that is in a moment. But it's really up to the business unit leader and their teams who are at the coalface, building, reviewing, and executing those operational plans, and their respective leadership teams to actually do the work and collect the data. So we want the data to be correct, and they're really in the box seat to provide that input. And finally, from a planning philosophy perspective, we feel that if it hurts, we should do it more. Annual planning and planning in general is not really joyful. Very few people, including these two kids, don't jump out of bed and say, I want to do annual planning today. So by increasing planning frequency, it kind of forces us to simplify things and get better as we go. Excellent. Let's move along to logistics. How does this all work? So I mentioned State of Atlassian earlier. The last 2 weeks of the quarter are when we revisit our long-term strategic priorities as a company and align on the associated initiatives and investments. Really important to level set. And it culminates in a piece of communication, usually a blog, a Confluence blog, usually with a town hall sort of video. This one's got Mike in a beanie, which is not uncommon. And a State of Atlassian takes, this form, and it has, in this case, Mike walking us through the contents. It basically gives teams guidance on any key changes for the quarter, any changes to our company level priorities and OKRs in the upcoming quarter. It also includes high-level guidance on any changes to additions, to resource allocations, so teams can react to those changes in their forthcoming operational plans. So, yeah, I think in a sentence, it's around providing that high-level strategic guidance to teams. Then, going back to this slide, we have our operation planning cycle, as I mentioned, of 2 weeks of the following quarter, where we do detailed planning against those strategic priorities that were communicated in the state of Atlassian. So these are the 2 building blocks of this quarterly planning cycle, and they rotate. State of Atlassian followed by ops planning, followed by, in a quarter's time, another state of Atlassian, and then another ops planning cycle. Rinse and repeat. So getting into the logistics of operational planning, I mentioned before this notion of a rolling 4 template. This is our operational template in Confluence. And as you can see, it captures a few different elements. At the top, we have our document owners and our contributors. We have links to referring strategies. We have top 3 areas for discussion. So this is kind of like, from an executive summary perspective, what are the 3 main things we want to actually communicate or discuss with our higher leadership team. So every team in Atlassian will be doing a rolling 4 page. We'll be completing this, and these ladder up depending on where you are to according to the different levels within the business, within the different business units. Further down the page, you'll have a shareholder letter, which is a fancy way of saying a executive summary, where we're really wanting to communicate to the stakeholder here the key points of the operational plan. The second section is devoted to our OKRs, reminding the reader, the stakeholder, of what our goals are, how they ladder up to the company goals. As I mentioned, we use the OKR objective and key results format here. This is the real meat of the page. This is effectively the priorities, investments, and trade-offs table. In earlier iterations, this looked like a more traditional roadmap broken down into quarterly columns. You can see here we've iterated. We've got a Q3 look back. So this is for Q4. So we've got a look back column here where we're reflecting on the previous quarter. Did anything significantly change, or were we successful in delivering against our commitments? Then we have an upcoming Q4 plan, so 0 to 3 month outlook. And then we have the following 3 months after that. So that would be 6 to 9 month outlook. What are the key kind of initiatives that we're looking to deliver in those timescales? We do like the $10 game here at Atlassian, particularly at an executive level. So if you could just effectively, if you had $10 within your organization, what would you spend it on? $2 for this, $4 for this, whatever, all has to add up to $10. It's just a really nice way of, at a high level, breaking down where you're investing your headcount, your folks. We always like to ensure any known risks are called out as a way of flagging that and our mitigation plans, what we're doing to address those. Also, we believe there's a lot of power in communicating what are we not doing. Okay, it's very easy to say yes to anything, but the best operational plans have a line, and you're very clear with your stakeholders. What are you not focusing on? Because you don't want to be tapped on the shoulder the following quarter and ask, oh, where's Project X or Initiative D? It's like, nah, we were never planning on doing that. Why did you think that? It's like, so this is where you put all the stuff that unfortunately you're not going to be able to get to. Section 4 is opportunities for funding. So this is where you would put all the stuff that your organization is not able to deliver. But if you had XYZ, normally more people or more funding, then what would that look like? What are the current resources in place to deliver against that initiative? And what's the ask? What's the additional ask beyond your plan? This is a more colorful visual on how the quarterly planning cycle looks like. So you can see here, this visual is broken down into 3 steps. You've got the ops planning in purple, where teams are updating their plans, including incremental asks. We actually use a spreadsheet, a headcount workbook to collate headcount resourcing so that we can get a really good snapshot of where our heads are within the business and what they're working on. This all culminates in these rolling 4 pages. Then there's a phase here in this visual, in this little infographic called classification, which is where we aggregate all of the asks, and we like to use the language of rocks, pebbles, and sand as a way to almost like t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large, the different initiatives in flight. Then we have a team that elevates this to the founders and exec ops, who then review the key asks and initiatives and the funding available, and they work to park a whole bunch of ideas. Unfortunately, they also decide on what initiatives are going to be self-funded by various budgets or elevated to the state of Atlassian, which is that high-level kind of investment and like company-level structure and set of strategic priorities, which is section 3 here. So there are various alignment meetings between different functions such as R&D and go-to-market. There's a State of Atlassian meeting, and then those key decisions and investment decisions are made and published in that State of Atlassian page that I shared earlier with the picture of Mike in a beanie. Awesome. Okay, so just to wrap up, I thought I might just close with a few final thoughts about our planning cycle. And I'm really putting myself in your shoes here, and I'm thinking, well, not every company is like Atlassian, agreed, but what are the like key takeaways or key principles that I might suggest you all kind of reflect on with your planning cycle at your organization? The first is to review your cadence. I think Atlassian missed a trick in not doing this a bit sooner, and so is corporate planning, reviewing your organization strategy and reviewing your investments and reviewing your headcount. Do you think you're doing that at the right cadence? Would there be benefit in increasing that cadence, lowering the lift each time you do it, because really you're just iterating, and revisiting particularly your ops plans more often than just once a year? I think there's a lot of power in delegating to the right level. I think you need to ensure that people giving you the information to inform these plans are at the coalface and are at that right level to be able to provide you with the right data. Because when you make decisions, they're only going to be decent if the data is correct. I definitely ensure that there's a feedback loop. One of the key things I really like about our planning process is that State of Atlassian comms piece, which is where the founders come back to everyone and say, thank you for all your time and effort in this planning cycle. This is where we've landed. These are the decisions for the upcoming quarter. That's so important. If you just have all this work being funneled into a black hole and then all of a sudden find out, oh, you're getting an extra team here and there, or we're merging this team because there's this other initiative, it's just sloppy. Okay? So make sure that you do close that feedback loop, because if nothing else, it really does reinforce that behavior that you want this planning cycle to perpetuate, which is you provide good information, you get the comms back. And ideally, it's positive comms that you want to hear and makes your life easier. So it's about almost treating this like a bit of a flywheel. And I think having a good feedback loop is really important to maintain that momentum. And the last thing is try and keep it lean, okay? You can actually get through this with starting with very high level, simple templates, simple mechanisms, a simple process, and really try to resist adding too much detail or additional asks on people. Definitely seek feedback with every iteration that you work through and see what's working for folks and what isn't. But I think there'll be a great appreciation. As I mentioned before, people don't jump out of bed and be like, yes, want to do annual planning or quarterly planning. So, but at the same time, particularly at a management level, it is their responsibility to contribute to this process. So you can help them to help you by just trying to keep it as lean as possible. That's all from me. All the best in your planning journey, and I'll see you on the other side.